Welcome to the deep dive for this week. Don't forget to visit the website at deepdiveau.net. Check out our socials and Patreon page at the Deep Dive AU. Subscribe via your favourite podcast app or like and subscribe at our YouTube page at the Deep Dive AU. Don't forget to check out our merchandise store at the merchandise link at our website. We can purchase new mugs and bumper stickers.
This is the Deep Dive Podcast. And here is your host, Michael Coles.
Phoebe Rogers is a clinical psychologist and couples therapist specialising in dating and relationships. Phoebe went from hopeless in love and choosing emotionally unavailable partners to healing and finding love. How? After calling off a wedding just 2 months before walking down the aisle, she vowed to heal. She worked on overcoming her fear of abandonment and soothing her own anxiety, which helped her date with calm and choose a partner who makes her feel safe, loved and valued. Along the way, Phoebe discovered a formula that works for finding and keeping a healthy love, and now teaches this to other women who want the same. Phoebe Rogers, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
Okay, so what are the unique communication challenges that neurodivergent couples often face, and how can these be addressed in therapy?
I think there are a few things. So one of them is as they start getting into conflict, they might be becoming dysregulated emotionally. And so really being able to pace it and slow down is really important, and not taking things personally. So I think it's a couples thing in general, but it's a neurodivergent thing. When you're feeling emotionally dysregulated and overwhelmed, you're kind of quicker to defensiveness. I see that quite a bit. And also, again, I think these are human being things, but this desire to get our point across and to be heard and to explain in lots of detail. And sometimes the other partner can't grasp what the point is or where it's going. So I think there are a few different things happening, actually.
Okay, so how can neurodiversity be embraced as a strength in a relationship rather than viewed as a barrier?
So I think we have to understand it. And I always encourage lots of reading, lots of looking at resources. But you know, the emotional sensitivity, the wanting to get things right in a relationship, I think they're beautiful qualities. Also thinking in a different way, often highly creative, certainly. So big ideas, lots of lenses of looking at things. You know, that balance of how do they use emotions as well as using kind of logic and rationality.
Okay. What strategies can couples use to create a supportive environment for open discussions about their needs and boundaries?
I love the idea. I think you do this, the couples meeting. I love that idea. And I see working with couples, they often don't check in with each other enough. And it's often in the busyness of life, right? Lots going on, you know, focusing on the children, the chores, all those things. So certainly making the time and putting that aside and scheduling that in so the relationship is prioritized and it's not missed. Definitely. Yeah, these check-in points matter a lot.
So in what ways can sensory sensitivities impact intimate relationships, and how can couples navigate these challenges?
I think, again, lots of talking. So couples are often negotiating this need for how much time together, how much time alone, how much time do I need to decompress, to self-soothe, to regulate, what is my preference, and just trying not to take that personally. It's just an individual need, and that's okay. So being able to talk about that is really important. And depending on what's happening in the week and what type of stress is there, there may be different needs, and that interacts with sensitivities. And certainly around different needs for touch, different needs for intimacy. I think the most important strategy is talking and communicating. The more you understand your partner, and I think we take for granted how much we know and understand our partner, the more you talk, the more you're able to navigate those things. Certainly.
So how can couples identify and appreciate each other's love languages, particularly when they differ due to neurodivergent and autistic traits?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think, and something, you know, I've done in relationships, certainly, like the way I love is not the way my partner loves. And so I think you have to be a bit of a detective sometimes and kind of go, that's their way, right? And remember that each day and internalize that. I might be seeking more quality time or more touch. A partner might be more acts of service. And so I think it's remembering that every single day, but also being an adult and asking for what you need, right? Your partner's not a mind reader. And I think so much of the time we want our partner to be a mind reader and kind of get it. But we have to use our words.
What role does emotional regulation play in neurodivergent relationships, and how can couples learn to support each other in this area?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think it's the foundation is like, how much stress am I carrying at the moment? The more stress I have, the harder it is to regulate my emotions. And so what do I need to do to look after myself? But certainly in couples therapy, it's not about supporting each other as that's not the first thing I do. It's actually, how do you support yourself? Actually, how do you turn inwards and understand what's happening in your body? What do you need? How do you soothe yourself? How do you understand what's coming up inside, what the triggers actually are? So maybe my partner says something that hurt me, and it hit on an older wound, and it made me feel like I'm not enough in some way. And so it's actually about going inwards and talking to that hurt part and going, you're okay. You really matter. What your partner is saying is not designed to attack. You're worthy of love. You're a good human. And so we're turning inwards and soothing ourselves. So I think we can then respond more effectively in the relationship.
So how can counselling help couples develop these conflict resolution skills that can be tailored to their unique perspectives?
I think what counselling does is, first of all, it provides the time and the space in the busyness of life. And I often find in that space that people say things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to say, or they've been holding back or keeping in. And I kind of see my role, it's a bit like being a translator. I might kind of slowly tease apart and pull out what the client is saying and absorb that and then present it back to the couple. So they're constantly getting new understandings of each other, actually, new understandings of their needs, new understandings of, their emotional world, their backgrounds, their family of origin, their wounds. And so I'm weaving all of those things into a bigger picture of what's happening for the couple in the present, and then giving the tools and the strategies to manage that. So the individual emotion regulation, the self-soothing, the self-validation, and then we might move to some communication skills. So how do I express what I'm feeling inside, and what do I need, and how do I say that in a way that my partner can get?
So what tools and resources are recommended for neurodivergent couples to improve understanding and empathy between partners?
So one of the books I find myself going to a lot is The ADHD Effect on Marriage. So that's not specifically for autism, but there's certainly that overlap there. I find that a really helpful resource. And then directing people to different podcasts, certainly different YouTube channels, to really understand. And as much as I work in that space, I kind of take each couple as they are in the present. So yes, there's neurodivergence there, and that's really important, but there's two individuals as well with their own history, their own family of origin. They're at different journeys in their diagnosis and self-understanding. So I'm trying to bring that into the room very, very much.
So how can neurodivergent individuals advocate for their needs and relationships without feeling overwhelmed or misunderstood?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think most of us struggle, and particularly in this space, there's a struggle to express myself. Certainly there's a big worry about hurting or offending my partner, or starting conflict, or it's not going to go very well. I don't want to make them feel bad. And so it's having this foundation, because I love my partner and they love me, like they really need to know. And so I often have to remind, like, your partner's here and loves you and cares about you. They do want to know. They want you to be happy. And so we have to challenge some of those fears and worries. And then it might be a script, or it might be that the couple needs to actually commit to slowing down, to regulating, to not letting the arguments escalate so things can be said, and trusting that what my partner has to say matters deeply and it's not designed to hurt me at all. They're saying something so we can get closer. So seeing the good intention is so important.
So, in what ways can therapy assist in building intimacy and connection for couples who may struggle with the traditional expressions of affection?
Again, the approach I take is two different individuals. And so we're talking very much about who you each are as individuals. What do you really need? How do you most feel loved? How do you not feel loved? We do talk about intimacy and what your own individual definition is of intimacy and your desires for intimacy. So there might be, different preferences for touch, for closeness, for affection, for physical intimacy. And I think it's really developing understanding, and then how do we work together so we each have a good chance of getting those needs met? And often emotional closeness can be the foundation of intimacy and of more physical intimacy.
So, how can couples work together to establish routines that cater to both partners' needs, including those related to neurodivergence?
Yeah, the routines, I think it's probably a constant work in progress, particularly if you're a couple with kiddies. And so it's that balance, I think, of the routine and being rigid with that, like that you have to stay on track with things, but also the space for flexibility, right? And so you're constantly, the couples meeting, the talking, the checking in. So priorities are really important, actually listing and ranking the priorities so things don't get left. We're actually using a Trello board in our household at the moment. We've just started that, and I think that's a really great idea. So different tasks have different priorities. We put them down, we assign them to one of us. We talk about the priority, when it needs to be done, has it been done? So I think it's just a way that works for both of you to kind of keep it front of mind, but also being kind and compassionate and forgiving with each other.
What are some common misconceptions about dating and relationships for neurodivergent individuals, and how can counselling help address these?
Yeah, it's I think there are so many myths in this area, and seeing neurodivergence as people, right? They are people, and to not make an assumption. I haven't met any neurodivergent person who is the same, right? Everyone is an individual. And so I think really seeing the strength that it can bring to a relationship, the different perspective that it can bring. I think maybe sometimes there's an assumption that neurodivergent people or people on the autism spectrum don't want a relationship, and that's not true at all. I have some clients I work with, and actually that's not a priority for them. And for some, they very much seek and want that. Absolutely. And it's working towards understanding, having an open mind, getting to know each other as individuals.
So, how can mindfulness practice be integrated into relationship counselling for neurodivergent couples?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Just in terms of the emotion regulation. So mindfulness is really about slowing down, observing what's happening internally for you. And so it helps you regulate and understand what's your emotional world at the moment, what's your headspace at the moment, and what you have capacity for. Right. And so by tuning inwards, we can understand what's happening inside and hopefully also share that information with our partner. Sometimes we're just on go, go, go mode and doing mode. And so I think it's really important to stop and turn inwards and notice what's happening inside.
So, what are the benefits of couples therapy specifically designed for neurodivergent individuals in understanding each other's experiences?
Yeah, I think people often seek me out, or they seek out a couples therapist who has experience in this space. And I have a background, I've worked with, children at the start of my career. Then their parents would often realize that they had some of the features of neurodivergence, autism, ADHD. And I think the benefit really is that I understand. I've seen and worked with enough people that I understand. And so I think clients feel like they're not re-explaining their story and their struggles, and that lens is already there. And then my job is to advocate and explain that often to a non-neurodivergent partner or a neurodivergent partner, but having different needs. And so it's clarifying things, it's helping partners understand triggers and sensory sensitivities and why emotion regulation is hard and what other comorbidities might be happening. And just working from that lens, where we're starting further ahead, if that makes sense.
Okay. So how can neurodivergent couples nurture trust and security in their relationship through effective communication and shared experiences?
The talking is everything, and I think people still don't share enough of their inner world, and if they did, they'd be further ahead. I thought of a strategy that I find really, really helpful is something called imago dialogue, which is really, truly listening. Your role as a listener to your partner is to really hold space for exactly what they're saying, picking up on the emotions, really validating and supporting that. And I think as partners, our role is to try and understand our partner's emotional world. And so we want to be feeding that back. It sounds like you're feeling really stressed. It sounds like there's a lot on your plate at the moment. I get why you'd be overwhelmed right now. And so bringing in that empathy and validation piece, your partner will then feel understood, heard, and we're building that trust and connection. That's
Okay.
a really
And the
nice skill.
final question that we'd like to ask you, we'd like to ask every guest here on the Deep Dive podcast, is that if there is one bit of advice in 30 seconds or less that you would like to give, what would that be?
Any advice? I'd say go to therapy. Not enough people go to therapy in terms of understanding themselves, figuring out who they are, what they bring to a relationship, what their triggers are, how to build connection. I think it's a really valuable thing if you can afford that and have access to it. That would be my advice.
And on that note, thank you, Phoebe Rogers, for being part of the Deep Dive podcast today.
Thank you so much.
For more information, go to therelationshipspace.com.au or check out her Instagram at therelationshipspace.